Hello and welcome to the fifth installment of the life of Elisha. And today we're looking at the story of Elisha healing Naaman, the warrior who is an enemy of the people of Israel. So we'll read the Bible story as it is written in 2 Kings chapter 5. Now Naaman was commander of the army of King of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I bring someone back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See, he is trying to pick a quarrel with me." Now Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes. He sent this message, "Why have you torn your robes? Make the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored. You'll be cleansed." But Naaman went away, angry, and said, "I thought that he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash and be cleansed in them?" So he turned and went off in a rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then, when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him. And his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is a God in the world, and there is none like him anywhere else." So, some questions now. Did Naaman want to come to Elisha? Well, that's just an opening question. He wanted healed. I don't think he was bothered that it was Elisha or not. After all, the letter went to the king in Jerusalem and not to Elisha. But Naaman went because he wanted to be clean of leprosy. It perhaps wasn't an obstacle to taking part in local, family and national life that it was in Israel, where we know that leprosy was greatly feared. Naaman talks about the city of Damascus and its rivers. If he belonged in Damascus, in what we now call Syria, then he would have been traveling something like 220 miles to get from Damascus to Jerusalem, and then had to find Elisha outside the city. What did he expect to happen? Well, Naaman was looking for some kind of ritual, some kind of hullabaloo and ceremony, chanting, and perhaps something difficult to do. But he didn't get that. In fact, he didn't even get Elisha. He stops at Elisha's door, and Elisha sends a message out to him. "Just go and do it. is the message. 7 times in the waters. And when Elisha does it, it is through probably Gehazi, his servant, that takes the word out to Naaman, and probably comes back in fear and trembling, wondering what Naaman might do. After all, this is a warrior who has raided the borderlands of Israel. Naaman is so angry that nothing is to be done, that Elisha is so offhand that he actually is prepared to leave. This part of the story would make the king of Jerusalem no happier, to think how offhand Elisha was with Naaman. But for Elisha, this was a simple matter. It was just healing, and God had told him what to tell Naaman. Well, do you have a soft spot for the River Clyde, or whichever river you grew up near? My closest, I suppose, growing up would have been the White Cart on the south side of Glasgow. Don't have a great soft spot for it. I do remember the bridge over it in Shawlands near the shop in which my gran worked. Along the banks could be seen giant hogweed. What a stupendous size of a plant, and yet so harmful. Well, for Naaman, the River Jordan was just a foreign river. It meant nothing to him. For Jews, of course, it is the river that the people of God passed over into the Promised Land. It was a border in the mind between the world and God, as well as a boundary between our place and the rest of the world. Naaman had been sent with money, with so much silver and so much gold, it would have been worth a couple of million, as well as the gifts of clothing. Naaman wanted his money's worth, and he must have been beginning to think that this whole 200-mile journey was more trouble than it was worth. What good was such an instruction as dip yourself in the water 7 times, end of story. No hullabaloo, no chanting, no ceremony. But of course he's clean at the end of it, washed and made pure. Let's think about a New Testament parallel. Look at the picture just now and see the picture showing Jesus, the large figure, speaking to one medium-sized figure, and then beyond him, another set of people, men. Who is this? What's going on? What story is this? Well, if you can tell, then it's the story of Jesus healing 10 lepers. Let's read this story. It's only a few verses on this page. Jesus travelled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. This man was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give thanks and praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." What a story. It's a great lesson for children, a reminder to say thank you. It's a great reminder for adults too, to be grateful, not just to people who do you a kindness, but also to our God, who gives of his best to those who call on him. And in this story, it is a Samaritan that comes back. Remember, the Samaritans and the Jews had fallen out long, long since. Not in Elisha's time, but spot that Elisha was in Samaria. But by the time of Jesus, The Jews, as they called themselves in Samaria, were looked down on as pretenders by the people of Israel and Judah. Still, it is this man who comes back to thank Jesus. And Jesus praises him and sends him on his way. God has been merciful, and why not? The world, is it grateful for what God gives? I'm not sure it is. It's grateful when it gets what it wanted from God, but that's not the same thing as what it should ask and should seek from God. I wonder whether sometimes people would rather be able to buy God's blessings, and then it would be on their terms. Here, what I've got, I will give you. Now, listen to my prayer. People don't love to be beholden to anybody. They want to be settled, a debt not carried forward. And yet the Christian's gospel tells us that we can never repay God for what he has given. The free gift of salvation, just for seeking Jesus, just for wanting to spend time with him and do what we can for our Father. That's all it takes. Everything else, well, it's undeserved, full stop. It's undeserved in youth, in adult life, in last years. Just say thank you, as Naaman did when he admitted that he would praise only the God of Israel in the future, as the foreigner did when he came back. And God bless you until our next Bible study series, which might be in a little while from now.